Hi guys, it is Tiny Little Whispers ASMR, and today I have another true crime case for you guys, and this one is a rather long one, so we will get right into it. The only thing I have for you guys today is there is a new video out on my second channel, so make sure you go check that out below if you're interested, and I will have that linked down in the description box. So currently there are some dogs barking outside. I'm really hoping, praying that you all cannot hear them today. So let's go ahead, let's dive into today's case, and we are covering the disappearance of Heather Elvis. Heather Elvis was born in Horry County, South Carolina on June 30th in the year 1993 to her parents Debbie and Terry Elvis. Horry County is where Myrtle Beach is located, so that general area is where Heather grew up. Heather had one younger sister, and I believe that was the only siblings that she did have. After Heather graduated from high school in the year 2011, her parents did allow her to move out of the house into her own apartment with a roommate. At the time, Heather was pursuing a career in cosmetology, and she was attending school for that. Heather also worked as a hostess at this time at two different restaurants. One was the House of Blues restaurant, and the second was the Tilted Kilt restaurant, and both of those are located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Heather's roommate was named Bree Warlman, and she also worked at the Tilted Kilt with Heather. In June of the year 2013, Heather was 20 years old when she pointed out a man named Sydney Moore to her roommate Bree while they were both working one night at the Tilted Kilt. Sydney was 37 years old, and he lived in Sakaste, South Carolina, which is just outside of Myrtle Beach. Heather showed a strong interest in Sydney, even though he was significantly older than her at the time. Sydney was also married to a woman named Tammy, and I'm not sure if Heather knew this or if she did. It doesn't really matter, but she still showed an interest in Sydney. Sydney was regularly at the Tilted Kilt, as he often would repair their kitchen equipment for them. So around this time, in the year 2013, Heather and Sydney began having an affair. Sydney was often seen coming into the Tilted Kilt during that time frame, and while he would come in, he would drop off bagels to Heather, even though there was no kitchen equipment that needed repairing at the time. In late September of the year 2013, Heather posted a cryptic tweet, which most people assumed signified the end of her relationship with Sydney. Right before this tweet happened, Sydney's wife, Tammy, had somehow found out about Sydney's affair with Heather, and Tammy forced Sydney to call Heather and end their relationship over the phone while she listened in. Bree, Heather's roommate, said that Sydney made Heather feel completely awful about herself and basically told her that she meant nothing to him and that he had used her during their whole entire relationship. After their relationship ended, Tammy was still very, very upset, and it was rumored that she would chain Sydney to the bed each night so that he was unable to leave their house. Tammy also took Sydney's phone and changed the passcode on it so Sydney was unable to use his cell phone. Tammy also requested that Sydney get her name tattooed on him as well, and Sydney ended up agreeing to all of these things because he just wanted to save their relationship. At this point, Sydney really could not do anything on his own. After all of this, Tammy began to contact Heather herself, even though Sydney was not having any contact with her. Tammy would text Heather asking if Heather was ready to meet the missus, and she would constantly threaten to harm Heather or even Sydney. Tammy texted Heather a lot, and Heather basically just ignored it. However, on November the 1st, still in the year 2013, Heather texted Tammy back and said that she did not need to worry about her anymore. After this, Tammy continued to contact the Tilted Kilt and said that Sydney would not be able to repair any of their kitchen equipment if Heather was still working there. Tammy would call the Tilted Kilt constantly, and this even got Heather sent home on a few occasions. At some point, Sydney managed to get into contact with Heather on his own and told her that Tammy was upset, not about the fact that he had an affair, since she was technically having an affair herself, but she was upset about the fact that Sydney had lied about having an affair to her. Sydney then affirmed to Heather that their relationship was indeed over, and Heather totally agreed with Sydney. Then she asked Sydney to have Tammy stop calling the Tilted Kilt, as it was affecting her work. After this, Florida. So they left South Carolina on November the 19th and did not return until December the 11th. Now that is a very long vacation, but that is what the Moores decided to do. So while Sydney was gone in Florida, Heather tried to pick up the pieces of her life and basically move on without him. Heather was excited as she had gotten a job at a hair salon in Myrtle Beach, and the job was supposed to start just before Christmas time. Heather was also looking forward to attending church regularly with her roommate Bree, and she had been kind of planning this next step out for a while and was excited for these positive changes happening in her life. However, Heather was also facing a rather large unknown in her life that caused her to be rather scared. Heather and others had noticed that she'd begun to put on quite a bit of weight, and Heather began to think that it was possible she might be pregnant with Sydney's child. Heather even bought and took a pregnancy test one night while she was working at the Tilted Kilt, but the test did not give a positive or negative result and instead came back with an error. Heather just assumed that she was pregnant with Sydney's child, and from their affair, even though there was this possibility, Heather tried to push it out of her mind and continued to try to move on from Sydney and basically Tammy, and so she ended up going on a first date with a man named Stephen Shorady on December the 17th. Heather and Stephen met that night on the 17th when Stephen picked her up from her apartment. After that, they drove around looking at Christmas lights in the area. Then they ended up in a mall parking lot where Stephen taught Heather how to drive his manual vehicle. Heather even took a few photos of herself driving the stick vehicle and sent them to both her dad and her roommate Bree. Stephen then took Heather back to her apartment and dropped her off around 1:15 in the morning. 20 minutes later, Heather received a phone call from a payphone that lasted for about 5 minutes. After this, Heather called her roommate Bree, who was out of town visiting relatives for the holidays. Heather told Bree that Sydney had just called her from a payphone and told her that he was planning on leaving Tammy and asked if they could meet up. Heather was extremely distraught with this as she was trying to move on from Sydney. However, at the same time, she is still thinking she was possibly pregnant with Sydney's child as well. Bree told Heather she should ignore Sydney and not call him back. She then told Heather that she was just getting her life back on track with moving on from Sydney, and that allowing him back into her life would make her take another step back. So their phone call ended. It lasted about 10 minutes, and then nobody heard from Heather for a few days. Now, it wasn't super alarming as Bree was out of town, so she was most likely not regularly hearing from Heather. But sadly, on the night of December the 19th, Heather's car was found parked abandoned at the Peachtree Boat Launch, which was located along the Waccamaw River in Sagasti, South Carolina, which, if you guys remember, is where Sydney lived. Heather's car was not parked in the spaces correctly, but was instead facing side to side. Heather's car was locked, but the police managed to get inside, where they found the vehicle belonged to Heather, but her purse and cell phone were not located inside the vehicle. The police reached out to Heather's family, friends, and work, and found that Heather was last heard from when she was talking on the phone to Bree in the early morning hours of December the 18th, after her first date with Stephen. The police then began to search for Heather and looked closely into her cell phone records. It showed that after Heather's call with Bree at 2:30 the morning of the 18th, that the payphone that Sydney initially called from, she tried to recall it back. The call to the payphone where Sydney had called her from earlier went unanswered. After this, Heather's cell phone moved around several times and eventually called Sydney's cell phone again before heading to the Peachtree landing. From there, at 3:37 in the morning, 3 phone calls were made to Sydney's phone, and each time the calls went unanswered. At 3:41, Heather tried calling Sydney's phone again, and then a minute and a half later, Heather's phone went completely dead. It was turned off. The police, of course, then got phone records from both Sydney and Tammy's phones, and there they found some interesting things. Sydney did not have contact with Heather until the early morning hours of December the 18th. Sorry, we're in December. However, Sydney's phone also never contacted Tammy at all during this time. Sydney claims that during this period, Tammy was holding on to his phone to make sure he did not text anyone else. Their last text to each other between Sydney and his wife Tammy had been on November the 2nd, but suddenly on December the 18th, the morning that Heather was last heard from, Tammy texted Sydney asking for the pot stickers and orange juice, and Sydney responded with, "Yes, ma'am," quickly afterwards. Tammy claims that she had been up in the late hours and that basically she was still unpacking and doing a lot of stuff from their recent vacation, and that's when she asked Sydney basically to bring her those items. I'm not sure why that would have happened around 4 in the morning, but but it was at a very odd time for someone, I feel, to be eating pot stickers and orange juice together. So the police then looked into Sydney's whereabouts on the morning of the 18th, and they found surveillance footage from outside the payphone where Sydney had called Heather. The surveillance footage showed that Sydney had entered a Walmart near the payphone and that he had purchased a few cigars and also a pregnancy test. Sydney then walked to the payphone where he called Heather. Now, Sydney and Tammy claim that he was purchasing the pregnancy test for Tammy and that she thought she was possibly pregnant. The police then found surveillance footage from 2 separate houses that were between Sydney's house and the Peachtree Landing where Heather's car was found. There on the surveillance footage, you could see Sydney's car passing on the way to Peachtree Landing at 3:39 in the morning and then returning towards his house at 3:46. Keep in mind, this was right after Heather tried to call Sydney several times that morning. The police searched the area of Peachtree Landing, however they found nothing related to Heather's disappearance. On February 21st, in the year 2014, police finally searched Sydney and Tammy's property. However, they did not find any remains for Heather or find her at all. But after this, both Sydney and Tammy were arrested for the murder and kidnapping of Heather. Eventually, both Tammy and Sydney got out of jail on bond and were allowed to move to Florida while the trial and case was still pending. In March of the year 2016, the murder charges against Sydney and Tammy were dropped. I assume just because there were no remains found. However, the kidnapping charges still stayed, and eventually Tammy and Sydney both went on trial at separate times for the kidnapping of Heather, and both were found guilty. They were both sentenced to 30 years in jail. So this case definitely haunts me. It just gets me for some reason. I wish we had more answers relating to Heather's disappearance. However, I do feel better knowing that Sydney and Tammy, are in jail, but are they really in jail for the right reasons, or should there be other charges brought against them? This is just awful. Whatever has happened to Heather is so saddening. And I really hope that, Sydney or Tammy do come forward with more information at some point in time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.